Senator Roberts.
Deputy President. In my capacity serving the people of Queensland and Australia, I note that during the last Senate estimates hearings, Adjunct Professor John Skerritt, Deputy Secretary of the Health Products Regulation Group within the TGA, commented with clarity previously lacking in 3 years of health officials' testimony. Finally, the truth. The Therapeutic Goods Administration, our TGA, did not check patient-level clinical trial data for the mRNA vaccines. Instead, using documents that Pfizer supplied and modified after the United States Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, requested. It's now very relevant to ask, how diligent was America's Food and Drug Administration, the FDA? That's America's equivalent of our TGA overseeing drug approvals. On the 2nd of November 2021, the British medical journal, BMJ, published an article titled COVID-19 Researcher Blows the Whistle on Data Integrity Issues in Pfizer's Vaccine Trial. So let's quote from that article. A regional director who was employed at the research organisation Ventavia Research Group, Brooke Jackson, has told the BMJ that the company falsified data, unblinded patients, employed inadequately trained vaccinators, and was slow to follow up on adverse events in the Texas trial sites. Staff who conducted quality control checks were overwhelmed by the volume of problems they were finding. After repeatedly notifying Ventavia of these problems, Jackson emailed a complaint to the US Food and Drug Administration. Ventavia fired her later the same day. Jackson has provided the BMJ with dozens of internal company documents, photos, audio recordings and emails to substantiate her allegations. End of quote. Brooke Jackson used FDA whistleblower provisions. A lot of good that did her, because the FDA dobbed her into Pfizer anyway. She was fired and her complaint ignored. Start of cover-up. Minister, on the 16th of November 2022, the British Medical Journal published an article titled FDA Oversight of Clinical Trials is Grossly Inadequate, Say Experts. In recent months, a court-ordered release of documents surrounding the FDA's approval of Pfizer's vaccine and confirmed Pfizer's malfeasance. Known as the Pfizer Papers, the FDA contested the release to the public. It wanted this information kept secret for 75 years. The Pfizer Papers show the FDA knew, or reasonably should have known, at the time of approval the clinical trials were incapable of supporting an approval. So let me say that again. The Pfizer Papers show the FDA knew, or reasonably should have known, at the time of approval the clinical trials were incapable of supporting an approval. Pfizer then did this. Their USA and European trial sites were getting so many adverse reactions that Pfizer had to cheat, and at the last moment added 26 new trial sites in Argentina, recruiting 467 doctors almost overnight to create 44,000 new glowing patient records, overwhelming the legitimate bad data. In Argentina, some sites and many patients do not appear to exist. Adverse events were hidden and patients who were harmed or killed were removed from the data. That's what the United States Food and Drug Administration rubber-stamped. And that's exactly what the TGA rubber-stamped. That is exactly what the TGA rubber-stamped. And now everyday Australians are dying. Look, I know people are tired of this whole thing. One Nation is as well. Yet there's a far larger issue that has gone without comment, that is too monstrous to simply let go. It relates to why the TGA refused to have anything to do with an Australian-developed, conventional attenuated virus vaccine that would have been safe to use. And Queensland University discontinued their conventional vaccine on spurious grounds, with real conflicts of interest. This opened the door for an entirely new class of drugs and supposed vaccines, mRNA, medicine by gene editing. This was not about Australian patient health. It was about patents. Over the last 15 years, 47 market-leading drugs have aged out of patent, costing pharmaceutical companies $30 billion a year in lost sales, including drugs that made up to 42% of Pfizer's drug revenue and 62% of AstraZeneca's drug revenue. This patent cliff is set to get worse with another 15 drugs, 9 of the world's top 20 selling drugs due to expire this decade. Pfizer will face losing another $15 billion in annual sales. The only way to replace so much revenue is with a whole new class of drug, mRNA. 400 mRNA drugs are currently in development. The manufacturing plants in Australia are already under construction before the drugs are tested. The problem for BigPharma was how to get these radical gene editing drugs accepted. Coincidentally, along came COVID, a miraculous opportunity to use the new, untested mRNA gene editing. The heavens aligned to wave mRNA technology through with no debate or scrutiny for humans and animals. To wave it through for humans and animals with no debate or scrutiny, untested. We now have an explosion of patient death reports, patient harm reports, on the database of adverse events notifications, including 940 deaths before doctors actually gave in to APRA blackmail and stopped reporting vaccine or injection deaths. The actual deaths from COVID injections are known to be underreported, grossly underreported, due to APRA's threats to doctors and nurses. In 2022, there were 22,000 more Australian deaths than usual. And our bureaucrats, health bureaucrats, can't tell us why. Half are unexplained, and the other half are supposedly people for whom the mRNA vaccines did nothing and led to their death. Yet the pharmaceutical industry's future is secure now for a generation. And that, Minister, is a crime this government refuses to investigate. That is a crime this government refuses to investigate. Health bureaucrats' lies and government deceit directly and indirectly killed thousands of people, thousands of Australians dead. Bureaucrats' lies destroyed millions of lives and livelihoods. Unless the Albanese government takes prompt action, it will be complicit with the Morrison government's crime. One Nation calls on the government to immediately enact a Senate Select Inquiry to identify the scope and terms of reference for a Royal Commission into state and federal government's gross mismanagement of COVID. Thank you.
Senator